There we go. Hi, Sadyk. Welcome.
Hi, Madre.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Okay, very good. Very relieved to see you. So,
Likewise.
we are just waiting for Joe. We've just sent them, resent them the invites. So we'll give them a couple of minutes. We'll start when they have gone. Hi, Priyanka. Just can you just write in the chat if you have a question? Good evening, Priyanka. Welcome. If you have another question, can you just drop your hand when you're done? Okay. Welcome, Dr. Mussaad. And we're just waiting for Joe to log on. There we go. Welcome, Dr. Joe. Let's give him a minute.
Can you hear
There
me?
we go. Yes, wonderful. Welcome.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Oh, I'm going to take this opportunity to welcome everybody to the first Emerge webinar from the Emerge webinar series, Healthtech Talk, where we're going to be continuing the conversation that we had on the Emerge stage with additional amazing speakers like Dr. Joe, who will be introduced by Dr. Sadyk. So welcome everybody to our first edition of the webinar series. I now would like to welcome Dr. Sadyk, health tech expert and researcher with credentials including an MD and an MBA in pharmaceutical management. His extensive experience in leadership roles across renowned global pharmaceutical organizations such as Bayer, Sanofi, and Ipsen, combined with a solid background of health tech venture capital. He's seasoned ENT doctor with a professional experience in France, and additionally, he's an accomplished immunology researcher with publications and peer-reviewed journals, and a member of both EAACI and ERS. Welcome to the floor, Dr. Sadyk. It's so lovely to meet you. You'll be moderating the session today, and I'm going to hand over the floor to him just to have the amazing speakers, and I'll be in the background. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Dr. Sadyk.
Thank you very much, Madre, for this presentation, and welcome everyone to our first webinar from big data to bedside. Is AI revolutionizing cancer treatment? My name is Dr. Sadyk Gusniev, and I'll be your moderator for this exploration into the intersection of AI, healthcare, and oncology. First and foremost, I'd like to extend our sincere gratitude to Emerge team and Precision Med team for organizing this event. It's an honor to be kicking off their summer series on Healthtech Talks. And before we dive into the fascinating world of AI, healthcare, and oncology, I need to address a little crucial point. The insights we're about to explore are cutting edge and exciting, but it's important to frame them correctly. So this webinar is designed it's for information and discussion purposes. So it's a disclaimer that we're here to explore ideas, spark conversations, and push boundaries of our understanding. So, however, it's crucial to remember that this isn't a substitute for professional medical or financial advice. And remember, the field of AI and healthcare is evolving at an unprecedented pace. What we discussed today might be groundbreaking, but it could also be refined or even redefined in the near future. So that's the nature of innovation, especially in the field of healthcare. So I encourage you all to approach our discussion with both enthusiasm and critical thinking. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, and always consider how these advances might translate to real-world applications. So now let's look at some compelling data as an introduction that underscores the importance of our discussion today. According to the latest Stanford AI Index Report 2024, AI has surpassed human performance in a range of intellectual tasks, including image classification, reading comprehension, and even computational level mathematics. And on the investment front, the latest CB Insights reports that in second quarter 2024, global venture funding reached 65.7 billion US dollars, with AI startups capturing unprecedented 28% of this funding. A record, it's a record with 18.3 billion. And Crunchbase notes that significant investments in the AI space, and perhaps for us most relevant to our discussion today, healthcare and biotech sectors emerged as the second largest sector, and it secured 17 billion in funding. For instance, Sadyk Therapeutics raised $1 billion for AI applications in drug discovery and development. These figures are they represent a seismic shift on how we approach healthcare and technology. And as someone who's witnessed the evolution of cancer treatment firsthand, and firstly as an ENT doctor in France and later in the pharmaceutical industry, I can attest to the transformative power of innovation. And I was there when the first immune checkpoint inhibitors arrived, revolutionizing our approach to certain cancers. I saw the rise of genetic profiling and personalized treatments, turning what once seemed like science fiction into clinical reality. And now we stand on the brink of another potential revolution with AI. And the pace of change in this field is astounding, and the possibilities are both exciting and challenging. And I think it's enough from me, and let's hear from our experts. Our first speaker is Dr. Mussaad Al-Razouki, operating partner at Deerfield Management. He will present a presentation on AI in healthcare from theory to practice. So Dr. Mussaad Al-Razouki, our virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sadyk, and I want to again thank Madre and the rest of the team at Emerge. I hope everybody can see my screen. I'm going to now maximize it. Can you just please confirm, Dr. Sadyk, that you can actually see my screen?
Perfect.
Fantastic.
We see the screen.
So thank you again for the introduction. Thank you for the disclaimer. I will also add that the reason I entitled this presentation as Practical Applications of AI in Healthcare is I'm sure we can all recognize that there is a lot of hype at the moment. Thankfully, I believe a lot of this is well placed. This, I believe, is something that is aspirational. We have seen multiple medical innovations throughout the different years and even, I would say, decades and centuries. And this is where I would actually like to start. So my first slide here, we took a select number of medical innovations. Obviously, all the different medical innovations, whether Nobel Prize winning or groundbreaking, cannot be included on one slide. However, looking at some of these most important innovations, we can really see in the last 170 years, since the germ theory that was propagated by Louis Pasteur and Dr. Robert Koch, we have seen a countless number of innovations in healthcare. And that, as you can see, has resulted in almost exponential increase in human population as well as life expectancy as well. Now, where does AI fit into this? So you'll see all the way at the right side of the screen, the final innovation we have here mentioned is the innovation of AI, or let's say the application of AI in healthcare and the rise of ChatGPT, which really took the world by storm last year, right? So this is, I think, particularly important in terms of, number one, the dispersion of medical innovation, which again is probably very significant, I would say, since even the printing press or even more recently, the propagation of smartphones in 2007. And what does the future hold? This is why the final bar here is gray. And we believe that hopefully with these new technologies, with these new innovations in healthcare, hopefully led by AI, that the average human population will hopefully one day increase to be 100 years, right? And it's also important to mention that life expectancy, while it is an important measure, does not give us the full picture. I think now health span is probably even more important. Living a high quality life, a very healthy life into old age, I think that is the goal of everybody. So now to dive deeper into the global AI market, right, when it comes to healthcare. As was mentioned by Dr. Sadyk, we can see that the investment in practical applications or in general applications of AI in healthcare has also increased exponentially. And we believe that to continue. If you look at the compound annual growth rate here, it's been growing at 37%, and we foresee that to continue its exponential rise well into 2030. Back in 2021, even despite being full on into the COVID pandemic, we see that AI spending in healthcare was around 11 billion, right? This is in terms of funding new startups. That number today is closer to 30 billion. And we foresee that to, increase again almost by 6 times to 180, 190 billion by 2030. This will come as no surprise to anybody that definitely the UK and the US are global leaders when it comes to innovation in healthcare, in AI in healthcare. However, notice here India, for example. There's a certain large hotspot and a lot of interesting activity that's happening in India now when it comes to innovation in AI in healthcare. So the summary of the slide is to actually say that innovation is happening all around the world. And yes, while traditional innovation centers in the West are leading it, because this is something that doesn't require a significant, let's call it a wet lab infrastructure or clinical infrastructure, there is no reason why we cannot see AI innovation in healthcare coming from all corners of the globe. Now, if we look at what are the specific problems or what are the specific subsectors of AI in healthcare? Again, it should come as no surprise to anybody that the majority of startups are focused on healthcare analytics. We are generating hundreds of petabytes and exabytes of data. And only through AI and using these new machine learning models will we be able as a healthcare industry to come up with different insights that can hopefully lead to more preventative tools. The next big part, and for those of you not familiar with this type of chart, this is called the Marimekko chart. Just think of it as a square pie chart. Medical diagnostics, again, being able to diagnose diseases before they actually go rampant through the body of the patient. This is, again, another holy grail and promise of AI in healthcare. So as of 2023, there were roughly about 3,000 different startups focused on delivering practical solutions of AI into the healthcare system. Again, the majority are in healthcare analytics and medical diagnostics, but we also see applications of AI in telehealth, in bringing the promise of medical robotics into the forefront, and also in streamlining hospital management, right? Whether it's on the revenue cycle side, on the quality side, or on providing more access to traditional healthcare systems. Now, what's the role of the physician in this new world and this new paradigm of increasing involvement of AI in healthcare? This was a survey done by Medscape back in 2023, and we can see that the majority of physicians are either somewhat concerned or, very concerned. Now, the research that we have seen, and this was announced during the health conference in Amsterdam just about 2 weeks ago, the Health Europe conference, is that the majority of the research and the meta-analysis presented by some professors is that AI alone or physician alone is not as good as a combination of AI plus physician. And this is something that, again, even before the rise of ChatGPT, myself and a few other, let's say, individuals who are interested in the future of healthcare. I don't want to say expert because it's very tough to be an expert in this emerging space. We believe in hybrid healthcare, right? And that is the combination of digital tools such as artificial intelligence together with the more traditional, let's call them pillars of the healthcare system, whether it's physicians or nurses, other allied health staff, or traditional elements of the healthcare system when it comes to delivering healthcare services like hospitals or clinics. Now, I do want to jump into a few case studies just to give you some real practical applications of AI in healthcare. Now, SarahCare is a company that I have personally invested in. I was one of the first investors to invest in this company back in 2015. And in the past almost decade, it's really risen to a tremendous, provide a tremendous value add to the UK healthcare system and other healthcare systems in Europe as well. So setting the scene, what is the main problem that SarahCare and other kind of digital health companies are trying to solve for? Today, the NHS, which is one of the world's largest healthcare employers and provider of healthcare services, they have a waiting list of 7.75 million people, and almost 13,000 hospital beds are occupied by patients that are medically fit, could be discharged and treated at home, right? And this is something that, again, is rampant across most Western economies as populations are aging. And unfortunately, we do not have the infrastructure to be able to treat patients in the comfort of their own home. SarahCare started off as a very simple digital marketplace connecting different caregivers, whether they are independent caregivers or they are caregivers that work with different private sector companies with patients that require these services. In 2016, we had 10,000 different professionals providing 50,000 inpatient visits in home per day. Over 2,000 businesses in the UK currently use Sarah technology. And probably most importantly, Sarah, even back in 2018, before all this ChatGPT hype, was investing very heavily in developing its own AI solutions. It started with a very simple chatbot called Martha, and now Sarah's data sets have reached almost 100 billion data points related to aging. It's probably the most unique and valuable resource in the entire world. So how is Sarah boosting efficiency using AI? First of all, they have automated at-home calling. So it enables the caregivers to have actually real-time vital signs from their patients. It's enabled 30 times faster response than the traditional method, right? Think of the traditional call center. Now that everything is digitized, we are able to respond 30 times faster when treating these thousands of patients every single day. It's actually reduced hospitalizations by 70%. And more importantly, because of these AI tools, we can now anticipate 80% of hospitalizations at least 7 days in advance. And most impressive, and this really shocked me when the management team shared it with us, today our AI falls prevention tool can predict 83% of all falls a week before they even happened. And this has allowed us to reduce, the number of falls by up to 20% just by being able to address those patients with extra care. Within the next few years, we hope that in partnership with the NHS, Sarah will be able to save almost £1 billion per year. That means almost 1 million, currently we're saving roughly £1 million per day, and we hope to get that up to £3 million per day. And today, Sarah is working with almost 150 different local authorities within the NHS. And again, as I mentioned, we're very proud that we've been able to reduce hospitalizations by almost 70%. Now I want to go to another innovation from the NHS, and this one is more focused on the topic of today, which is cancer detection. So an AI tool was launched a few years ago called Mia, and this was able to actually detect 11 cases of breast cancer that both oncologists and radiologists had overlooked during your typical mammography analysis. Now, these were very small cancers and undetectable to the human eye. In one particular case study, it was a 6-millimeter tumor, right? And thankfully, in that case, once the AI detected it, the patient was able to receive less invasive treatment and had a better ORR or better survival odds. Now I want to go to a different company called Prognosis, which was founded out of Chicago. And this is a company that is trying to tackle sepsis, which is an infection in the blood, and that typically results in almost 350,000 fatalities in the world. Now, this particular startup, even though they were probably able to launch their AI service without FDA approval, they actually decided to wait roughly 18 months to demonstrate both safety and efficacy and get FDA approval like any other therapeutic or diagnostic before launching to the market. So their Immunix platform actually is built on a data set of almost 100,000 blood samples from 25,000 patients, and they use 22 parameters to be able to predict that this patient has a high risk for blood infections or sepsis, thereby saving hopefully hundreds of hundreds of thousands of lives and multiple millions of dollars to the healthcare system. Now, finally, I do want to talk about an accelerator that we organized through our Cure affiliate and in partnership with MIT Solve. This was the exchange program, which we launched in 2022, and we announced the winners. We launched it in 2023, and we announced the winners in early 2024. So we actually solicited applications from almost 100 different AI startups from around the world. And we ended up selecting a top 10 list together with MIT. And then the top 5 companies were awarded residency in our building in New York. The different categories we were looking for when it comes to practical applications of AI in healthcare was predictive modeling, for example, to help patients monitor and manage their health conditions, whether it's a chronic disease like diabetes or other types of metabolic diseases. You also have radiology advances, which again, as we saw in the previous example with Mia, this is another big promise of a practical application of AI in healthcare. And then most importantly, the promise of early intervention, especially with diseases that today are not well understood and not well diagnosed, like Alzheimer's and other neurological diseases. And again, we believe that the next 3 advantages in terms of this next chapter we're entering in terms of AI, the AI healthcare revolution, is to also hopefully avoid future pandemic like COVID-19, and to, again, not only have predictive analytics, but what we call protective analytics, and to protect our societies from both epidemics and pandemics. And finally, is also to improve patient satisfaction, which is becoming increasingly important in the healthcare world of today, where more consumerism models are taking precedent, and payers are increasingly paying not only for prevention and paying for performance, but also paying for patient satisfaction. Now, our winner is actually a company called Al-Razouki.ai, which is actually focused on practical applications of healthcare, specifically in curing cancer. And what they are targeting is, what we can assess to be a $25 trillion market over the next 30 years. And that's to remove the main barrier in precision oncology, which is the time spent on linking genomic data with biomedical knowledge or phenotypic data. And this overlay is particularly important, and this will help us come up with actionable recommendations and really usher in this hopefully one-day era of precision medicine. And that's to be able to target the specific biology of the patient and using different biological therapeutics that are mostly gene-based to address our underlying biology and hopefully even prevent us from developing these cancers in the future. And again, similar to what I mentioned earlier, this is this hybrid healthcare model of encouraging both oncologists and AI programs to work together on a sort of AI molecular tumor board, which will help bring faster clinical decision making and to also reduce costs and improve access to patients around the world. Now, these were the other 4 finalists, and I will highlight just 2 more of the finalists. Deep Echo is a company based out of Morocco, which is actually using AI to democratize access to fetal ultrasound, right? This is something that is not available in many emerging markets. And through its software and hardware innovations, it is now bringing this very important, technology, fetal ultrasound, to patients around the world. Another finalist I'd like to also highlight is Open Health. This is a company which is using AI in terms of delivering different healthcare screening and educational tools in a very unconventional setting in healthcare, which is barbershops, again, targeting a very under-addressed community in the US, the African American community, by providing them with different screening tools and education tools, which will hopefully result in prevention. All these companies, you can visit the Cure website or the Cure LinkedIn page, and you can see detailed interviews with the founders of these companies that are developing practical solutions in AI. Finally, through the Cure, we're actually offering a very high, let's call it a highly selective AI course, AI education course, which will introduce different executives in healthcare to the basics of AI and have practical applications and case studies as the ones I had just gone over, but in more detail with the attendees of this course. This course can either be delivered in our headquarters in New York or it can be delivered on site. If any of those are interesting, please reach out to me at the end of this talk, and we're happy to provide some more information. Again, the course is a very short 5-day course. The morning sessions will be very very didactic, educational. We'll give you all the information you need by an MIT professor on the basics of AI and how we can apply it to healthcare. And then the afternoon sessions will actually be led by some of those case studies and the CEOs and executives of these companies that I had mentioned that will share with you their real-time learnings on how they are solving a particular problem in healthcare with, again, a practical solution of AI in healthcare. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions towards the end of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mussaad, for that illuminating presentation. As always, the case studies were awesome, and me personally, I was impressed by Sarah case, and the cancer detection startup was particularly striking. Our audience has a chance. We have a 5 minutes discussion window. You can address your questions in Q&A section in chat. Speaking on an AI in breast cancer detection startup, let's delve deeper into this. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The AI tool identified 11 cases of breast cancer that human radiologists missed. So it's quite remarkable. And could you please, Dr. Mussaad, elaborate on the implications of this for cancer care in general? And yes, how might similar AI tools change the landscape for other types of cancer detection?
Yes, I would say as a digital health industry, which has only been around for the last 15, 20 years maximum, right? We've been playing around with what's known as fractal analytics, right? Being able to use computer systems to look at, different images in the real world. That's why many of you, whenever you want to access a website, will ask you to identify bicycles or to identify fire hydrants and help get these computer programs better at recognizing images in the real world. We've seen it work with dermatology in terms of prevention. There are a lot of startups that today you can download, take a picture of a particular rash on your skin. The AI will do most of the heavy lifting. And then obviously, there is a disclaimer that you will then need to go see your dermatologist. But having that, especially when it comes to countries that have a huge issue with rural care, right? So this is only for dermatology, where there are far more dermatologists per thousand than oncologists, right? Or radio oncologists. So the ability to do the initial screening, this is where it becomes very interesting. Obviously, again, going back to my point on hybrid healthcare, we will, for the foreseeable future, need to have this duopoly, right? To have both the doctor and the AI support each other in coming up with the diagnosis and obviously the treatment plan. But definitely, it, I think, is very promising for certain types of, let's say, surface-based different types of oncologies and cancers, but even those with looking at different histology slides, and the number of histologists are also few and far between. But having innovations there by looking at also different biopsy samples through histology, I think the potential is very exciting.
Thank you, Dr. Mussaad. Thank you for that insight and your perspective. I would like to invite to our discussion Dr. Joe Lennerz, Chief Scientific Officer of BostonGene. BostonGene is a leading company providing molecular genetic and immunoprofiling solutions in cancer. So Dr. Joe Lennerz, thank you again for joining our webinar today. It's a great honor to have you here with us. And I would like to elaborate on the very important topic that Dr. Mussaad raised about the workloads for healthcare providers. From your perspective in precision oncology, how do you see the potential for AI not only improve early detection, screening, but also reduce workloads for healthcare providers while improving patient outcomes?
Thank you. First of all, congrats, Mussaad. Fantastic presentation, very comprehensive, and you raised all the right questions. To answer your question, I think there's, of course, very likely absolutely no reduction in workload in medicine. As illustrated in the beautiful graph, maintaining health maintenance will become part of healthcare. And there are so many additional layers that AI will enrich our ability to serve up and use data, that I think that there's actually an increased demand for data analytics and computer science in medicine. What might happen is, if we apply it correctly, that it might increase the face-to-face time of a physician-patient relationship. I think that is more or less a dream, and I hope that that will be possible. And making sense of the data, I hope, is what AI can evolve to. But whether that leads to an overall reduction of work, I highly doubt.
And maybe I will just add that I think it's still the case that the average physician spends 4 minutes with a patient, right? Or on average, the visit is about 4 minutes. So hopefully this will free them up at least to spend 10 minutes, if not 15 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you to both speakers. We have several questions in our Q&A chat. The first one, I think I will address to Dr. Joe Lennerz. With the advancement in diagnostics capabilities brought by AI, the instances of disease such as cancer will inevitably rise. How will already struggling hospital systems manage the increased number of patients? From Anne-Marie.
Phenomenal question. I would say that the incidence, which is of course the number of newly detected cases, might actually not rise that dramatic. It might be that we identify cancers at earlier stages. So that is the hope. I think, Mussaad has beautifully illustrated that. The hope is similar to the example with preventing the falls. I think it is requiring reliable technologies, and just detecting or detecting it alone can't solve this. So what I think the question is aiming for, how can an already stretched and thin healthcare system use depleted resources to deal with this wave of innovation that's coming in? And I have two quick pointers for that. One is, we cannot expect that tech giants solve that question for us. Meaning the fact that the AI industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry, is interested in the healthcare sector because its value, because its richness of data, and because it is a very valuable market in itself. We cannot expect that these people outside of our, let's call it, healthcare sector, with experience of doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals, we can't get the external vector to come in and ask from them to solve that question. In other words, we must be using our depleted resources very, very effectively. That in reverse, the second point is, so not every AI tool by itself, even if the value proposition is absolutely ripe, as a sole puzzle piece, can deliver something better. It must fit into the system. So let's say if you have a sepsis screening tool that identifies sepsis before it happens, and you're stretched thin, you have no resources to give antibiotics, it might be wiser, before implementing the AI tool, to up your stock and use your resources to get the antibiotics right. So in other words, overdevelopment in a high-tech industry without keeping the associated care pathways at the same level might be a strategic error. So in other words, you cannot take the whole wave of patients in your hospital, but you can take some and increase your ability to deal with that workload. I don't know if that answers the question completely, but I think that might be a strategy to apply.
Thank you, Dr. Joe Lennerz. We are quite limited in time. We have a few more questions, but I think we can answer them at the end of our webinar. And one of them is related to ethical aspects. And Dr. Joe Lennerz, as far as I know, you will cover this topic in your presentation. So now let's move to your keynote, and Dr. Joe Lennerz will present on precision oncology powered by AI transforming cancer care. So we are eager to hear more about your work in this field.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So I hope this is okay. I hope I share this. I will jump between the slides a bit, so I hope that this is okay. Can you see this?
Yeah, we can see it. It's great.
Perfect. Wonderful. So what I thought is that I wanted to cover 6 relevant concepts that I believe if you're considering working with AI and precision oncology that you might want to consider. And I want to jump right in. I show you the summary slide first so you know what's going to come, and then we get through the slides. So I hope that I will be able to convince you that AI definitely needs a focus. There's a system called UMS, which is a utilization management strategy. I think we just briefly spoke about that when it came to hospital resources. I want to emphasize human governance structures and the importance of regulatory science. I want to mention the financial sustainability, and then the pre-competitive space is a very important aspect. So let's start with that AI needs focus. What I mean with this, and I'm using here 2 very, very common things. One is time traveling, which I'm sure you all have done, at least mentally, and then a Russian doll model of a quality system. And I want to start that by giving you sort of an idea. So let's start with time traveling. AI hasn't solved that, but I wanted to start with that. So where you are in the time of a medical AI solution. So I clicked on the lung here to say, are we talking about an initial diagnostic assessment? Are we talking about using AI and machine learning for multi-cancer early detection? Or are we in the time of, let's say, a molecularly informed treatment decision? Where you are you in the pre-diagnostic, in the diagnostic, or the post-diagnostic period, is one of the key elements that you must examine when you try to implement AI into, let's call it, precision oncology. And the reason for why that's so important is because it follows completely different paradigms. If you have like in the example that Mussaad provided in breast cancer, if you identify a subset of patients that might have false positives, you might identify someone as having breast cancer who does not have breast cancer. You need to have a care pathway to deal with this. So to illustrate this in an example, and why I'm saying that AI needs focus, is not only do you need to define the time, but let's say if we talk about an initial diagnostic assessment, and I use COVID-19 as an example for a diagnostic. I don't know if you heard about it. It's been this pandemic. I think it affected a lot of us. I don't know, just thinking. If you take a test like that, the diagnostic test, of course, uses an analyte, and that's in the center of, let's say, this diagnostic tool. But around that is a procedure. Are you using a buccal swab? Are you using a nasopharyngeal swab? So that's a procedural layer that sits around this. So in the Russian doll, this would be the second layer, the somewhat larger group. And then there's the diagnostic service layer. That means, is this offered in your healthcare system? Are you going to a rapid testing site, etc.? And typically that diagnostic service lives in a healthcare ecosystem. Now, of course, the very traditional pre-analytic, analytic, and post-analytic part is broken here. In this model of quality, you have to see the physician living in a healthcare ecosystem that has access to many, many diagnostic services, many procedures, and many diagnostic tests. But the important part, which is very intricate for precision oncology, is that any layer that you interfere may have consequences at the next layer. And to provide this, since we're talking about AI and computation as a formula, If you implant AI, let's say in this case, the procedural layer, let's say to identify someone with breast cancer, the quality of that addition of AI is a function of the sum of all the implied changes. So as mentioned in the example of, an AI wave coming and patients coming to a hospital, if you do not have the adequate services available, if your healthcare ecosystem is not there, this plane that we're providing diagnostic quality on is not only the test or the procedure or the service, but the absolute or the delta between the original state and the one with AI. So I wanted to provide this as a pointer to say that there's a relationship between your AI model that might affect one layer and the indirect or direct consequences at another layer. So to take this to the next level, I'm sure you've seen like the backdrop picture that I'm showing here about medical records that now, of course, with the promise of large language models can be abstracted. And then, of course, the question is, how would we ever utilize this effectively? And the so-called UMS model is maybe providing an approach to this. To showcase how that can be used, for example, again, in the example of precision oncology is the following. So again, on this timeline of presentation to therapy, wherever that is, there's a lot of things happening in your healthcare system right now, and that is referred to as utilization. So how do you currently utilize diagnostic markers, prognostic markers, predictive markers, etc.? And then there's something, let's say you're considering implementing a molecular test in your healthcare system. So now you're deviating from what you're currently utilizing, and you want to implement, and I'm using molecular diagnostics. It can be AI powered, it could be an AI decision support, but I'm just using this because I'll give you an example in a second, that your decision making might be influenced by it. So this is effectively the state that you want to be. So this is the state what we have now. This is where you want to be. And then you make a financial proposal and you say, okay, this is what we want. The question then becomes, how do we get from where we are now to where we want to be? And that is a strategy. So in other words, you have to manage how you would get there, and relevant considerations are provided here below. And you can get to that with many different approaches, and you have to have a relevant outcome measure, of course, behind it. So portrayed as an example that is offered by the company that I'm very proud of being part of the team, is if you want to integrate things, let's say samples and clinical data using many different abstractions into something that is providing a concise summary, for example, between DNA, RNA, and germline findings as actual findings with the patient info, and you want to abstract a very complex cancer treatment timeline to make treatment timeline really personalized decisions for FDA and NCCN compliant oncology applications, you somehow need to get there. And this can be done in many different ways. So I want to show you one example on how to abstract a treatment timeline. As an AI-based data extraction, you've seen your own notes, your patient notes with certain wordings that are highly customized. And then, natural language processing and now generative AI can take these tools and apply basically a very quick analysis using UMLS, extract concepts, and reconstruct an isotemporal timeline of the key events. Now, I'm just using this as an example on how to take a non-standardized piece of management tool in medicine and apply an AI to get something that's not only visually fast, but you can get to medically meaningful information fairly quickly. So simply put, the UMS concept that I briefly outlined is a combination of utilization management, and a strategy on how to get there to ultimately say, like, what do we want to do and how should we do it and how do we get there? This was published by Helen Hu. And, if you want the reference, I can, of course, provide that to you. The third part, which is fairly simple to understand, is, of course, that we need human governance structures. I'll give you a quick example that is actually from ML Commons, a group called MedPerf. And if you own data or if you own a model, It might be that you own both, which is great, but then you serve a dual purpose. You might be a dual owner. But if you assume that a company that has a model wants to somehow utilize data in a federated fashion or not, the question becomes, who decides on what will get priorities? In a hospital, there might be data ownership issues because the data is not only owned by the hospital. There are many other considerations, ethical considerations, consent-based considerations, or the right to be forgotten, which is a right in certain countries, even legally mandated. So somehow you need to make sure that before benchmarking an AI algorithm, where you hand the AI algorithm into a compute infrastructure, that you have some sort of committee that will say we want to use the data for that. And typically that depends on many factors. So this itself, including the human governance structure, can be solved by AI. And if you haven't seen the paper, it was published in Nature Machine Intelligence. It's called MedPerf for Medical Performance Assessment. And it is a step-by-step introduction on how to govern your data, your ownership issues, as well as creating a human governance structure. Now, as a fourth point, real quick to mention this is, of course, what's missing on this slide here is regulatory science, meaning the regulation around it. It is implied, as I pointed out, in some of the dependencies. However, what I think it is time for is that this technical innovation exceeds current regulatory frameworks. And I think our current regulatory science definition has to be extended a little and said that we're also applying the scientific method to challenge current concepts and drive meaningful regulation. Now, that is, of course, a big mouthful. So what does that mean practically? So first of all, we must recognize that the patient benefit in medicine with AI can be exceeded, so more benefit, if you have a regulatory compliant medical problem that you can solve with AI. So in other words, at first glance, this seems very attractive. However, we must recognize that certain components have certain ramifications that might not be necessarily known by the medical professionals using AI, neither by the AI developers. And to quickly give you an overview, terms like the purpose of something, the regulatory term is the intended use or the indication of use, etc. So they're very intricate definitions. And I want to give you a few very important historical examples, and those have been published 2 years ago, but I just want to illustrate those because they might be known to you. The first example is IBM Watson. The second is a retina screening tool from Google. The third is more a personal one, ROC curves. But if you look at the theme of this table, which is complicated, please feel free to take a screenshot and look at it, that certain of these tools had a brief dip because they ignored a certain regulatory concept that the same teams subsequently embraced, and we provide some of the breakthroughs that emerged from that. And, for example, many of the IBM Watson authors acknowledge the critical role of regulatory aspects, even joined certain pre-competitive aspects like the ECLAIR guidelines, etc. And I provide these examples just to illustrate that embracing regulatory concepts might actually further your ability to embrace AI. Of course, as previously outlined, financial sustainability is a key thing. I want to point out two quick, very practical things. One is that a local program that you might be actually an effective strategy to move forward, but you can attack financial sustainability at the government, even at the supranational level when you work, for example, with the WHO. So you probably need both a bottom-up, use case-based, and a top-down, long-term strategy. And one practical thing at the bottom is, of course, smart contracting, which I'm sure you know. But for healthcare systems that want to get into AI, there's an art of contracting around that. Finally, I want to emphasize the pre-competitive space by introducing a quick question. You may have wondered what was before USB. I mean, I'm sure you may remember your first USB stick and who gave that to you, and you may have wondered what that looked like before. That's in the backdrop. Why I'm mentioning this is that AI is sitting in front of, or we're all sitting within this gigantic wave of problems that can't be solved by any individual party. And a proven approach, and I just used USB as an example, is the so-called pre-competitive space, which is largely ignored in medicine, unfortunately. It is abstract. It's effectively a room, an abstract room, and where people come together to share ideas, just like this amazing seminar today. And it requires intricate structures, code of conduct, antitrust guidelines, etc. But it is absolutely underutilized in medicine. And other accomplishment in this pre-competitive space is, for example, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and things that we use every day. There are some initiatives. I want to show you one example, and please feel free to scan the barcode to get to those resources. This was a joint conference organized by the US and Germany, and many participants from the European Union, called Data for Health, where we started where other conference ended, with a discussion and barcamp sessions, producing a series of graphic recordings that explain concepts that benefit hopefully the entire community. So in summary, I pointed out 6 things that you might want to consider. And if you have other questions or comments, etc., or if you want any of the resources shared, please feel free to link me on LinkedIn. And with that, I hand it back to Dr. Gusniev. And thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joe Lennerz. Very insightful presentation. And the questions really underscore the complexity and potential of AI in healthcare and precisely in cancer care. Was very interesting on the framework for AI development in healthcare with a federated system that balance the oversight and innovation. It's already implemented? Are there any real life examples of successful implementation of this type of managing the AI development?
Yes, there are. For example, many laboratories use AI for performance monitoring, for procedural monitoring. When it comes to decision making, I think the current framework demands a human in the loop. And I think that's something you mentioned, ethical concerns earlier. One of the key elements to recognize is technology, and AI, first and foremost, is a technology, cannot be made responsible. You cannot make AI responsible for a decision. Now, that is a somewhat philosophical concept, but if you are depending your decision on a tool, you are still responsible for the decision. So in other words, when you ask, is there an example where AI or any type of machine is taking over the decision making, that requires very stringent regulation? The only example that I'm aware of is auto defibrillators, where when someone has a heart attack and the ECG is recording something and then automatically decides whether and what kind of impulse is given. There are a few other examples like this, but when it comes to cancer care, we're talking about life-changing events, and for now, most of the examples have a human in the loop. There are many examples of human in the loop tools, but a human out of the loop is probably going to take a while until providers and the healthcare system in general will accept that.
Thank you, Dr. Lennerz. We have several new questions from our audience. The first one from Faraz Siddiqui. Can you guide or suggest how AI or any such tool can help mainly to curb the prevalence of diabetes or hypertension, which are sort of epidemic in Pakistan? Dr. Mussaad, could you share your vision of this?
Sorry about that. Excuse me. Thank you for your question. I think it's a fantastic question. But today, I think such metabolic diseases like diabetes type 2 have really already been curbed significantly by GLP-1 receptor agonists, right? So to me, this so far has been a great medical innovation and something we highlighted in the chart, even though that these medicines were launched back in the early parts of 2000. Thankfully, given all this research over the past 15 years now, we can see how safe they have been specifically to treat diabetes. Now, obesity is another, I think, discussion worthy of perhaps another panel. But certainly, there is a role for AI in, first of all, propagating truthful healthcare information about these diseases and about the treatments and helping us avoid other, what's called fake news in healthcare. But again, to me, these types of problems are best addressed through a medical intervention like a GLP-1 receptor agonist.
Thank you, Dr. Mussaad. One more question about the Renew system at Mayo Clinic. Yeah, I can answer it myself. I think that it's a fantastic example how AI can help and revolutionize diagnosis in rare and ultra-rare disease. And the question is about what we consider about implementing similar systems in MENA region. I think that there are several challenges, and the major challenges are data fragmentation. The primary hurdle is the lack of unified patient data in the MENA region and standardization. For AI to work effectively, data needs to be standardized and well annotated. But despite these challenges, the potential benefits are enormous. And if you have such a project, it's a great initiative. So as we wrap up, I'd like to ask you one more question and to cover the topic that we didn't raise during this meeting. During my time I witnessed a significant shift in how we approach drug development and prescription. So we moved from a one-size-fits-all model to a more targeted approach, where molecules are designed and prescribed based on specific genetic mutations. These mutations are now a crucial part of drug labels, guiding treatment decisions. So this evolution parallels advancement we're seeing in precision oncology. Technologies like next-generation sequencing, immunoprofiling, and RNA sequencing are opening new doors, and not just for clinicians, but for drug manufacturers. So Dr. Joe Lennerz and Dr. Mussaad, I'm curious about your thoughts on this synergy. How do you see these precision oncology technologies benefiting drug development, and conversely, how might pharmaceutical companies contribute to advancing these diagnostic tools?
Dr. Mussaad, you want to start?
Please go ahead, Joe.
So one element that I believe that drug developers are, of course, absolutely essential for any, or not all, but many of the diagnostic advances. First, large and vast amounts of data are surmounting during the drug development process, and managing those is, of course, first and foremost, a data assortment challenge. Now, many of this almost fluid knowledge around this, how to select a compound, how to and when to engage in progressing through different stages, what to plan early during phase 1, and how to plan a regulatory strategy all the way to stage 3. All of those steps have been currently tackled, and AI can help, but I would call it another tool in that very, very complicated, almost art of drug development. Second point I want to make is regulation of alternative sources of drug development, indication expansion, and use of the data to expand the portfolio is, of course, an absolute challenge. There are many consortia currently being built. I'm sure you've seen some of the reviews about AI and drug development. What I think as a quick, I think you're also asking like what will come sort of as a visionary statement. I believe what we see in cancer is that there's the so-called companion diagnostic concept where mutation indicates the prediction of a certain response. That concept itself might lend itself to other diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and other more autoimmune or degenerative diseases. And to come full circle to the other question, it might entail more than just drug development. So the diseases that were just mentioned in the prior question, diabetes and hypertension, indicate that while they can be attacked through a pharmaceutical approach, there's probably one of the biggest hurdles of mankind to fully understand how nutrition, and I mean long-term, decade-long nutrition, contributes to the maintenance of health. And AI might be able to extrapolate some of the things that are otherwise almost impossible to study. So with that, I think I hope I covered some of the aspects how AI can contribute to drug development and hopefully beyond.
Yeah, maybe from my perspective, just to add to what Dr. Joe mentioned, I'm going to be a bit controversial here. Certainly, there are certain big pharma companies out there, and I'm going to name them specifically: Roche, Regeneron, Amgen, and GSK. They probably have decent genomic programs in-house, but the vast majority are not investing enough, to be honest with you. And just like we saw during the COVID pandemic, most of the innovation in terms of vaccines, and thankfully as a human society, we're able to develop vaccines within a year. I think the last time we developed a vaccine was the MMR vaccine back in the 60s, and that took us 4 years to develop. Those innovations came out of two small companies, a biotech company in Cambridge that everybody knows now called Moderna, and another one based out of Germany called BioNTech, right? And they partnered. I mean, Moderna was able to distribute the drugs on its own, but BioNTech partnered with Pfizer, and today wears Pfizer's stock, right? So most likely innovation will happen outside of the big pharma companies. Most likely they will then invest and either acquire these innovations or partner to then distribute them through their channels. But certainly the promise is there. I'd venture to go further and say that not only will we hopefully develop drugs for orphan diseases or rare diseases where we can treat a human knockout that's in 3,000, 4,000 people, but hopefully we get to a stage where again, this is very aspirational, but where the patient will have their own 3D printing drug device in their home and be able to print the exact dosage needed to treat or prevent a particular ailment, right? That I think is the future that we need to work towards as an industry. And maybe just as a final quote on kind of AI and the promise of AI, I want to go back to this quote I heard recently from Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, right? He was the technical co-founder of Apple with Steve Jobs. And he says there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence today, but we have to realize as a human society that there's no replacement and no such thing as artificial wisdom, right? So wishing you all hopefully many more practical applications of AI and to hopefully have a lot of wisdom in your lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this wisdom. Because we're currently, it's time to conclude our webinar, and we've covered significant ground today from the broad application of healthcare to its specific impact on cancer treatment and the potential for AI to analyze vast amounts of data, identifying patterns, personalized treatment plans, and etc. So, however, as we discussed, there are still challenges and that we need to overcome, including data privacy concerns, ethical considerations, and the need for robust validation of AI models in clinical settings. So I encourage all of you to continue exploring this fascinating field, and the intersection of AI and healthcare is evolving quite rapidly, and staying informed is crucial for all of us in the medical community. Once again, a big thank you to our rockstar experts, Dr. Mussaad Al-Razouki and Dr. Joe Lennerz. And thank you, Emerge, for making this webinar possible and for their ongoing efforts to foster important discussions in healthcare technology. Madre?
Thank you very much, Dr. Joe, Dr. Mussaad, and Dr. Sadyk. It was just incredible listening to all the valuable input and where we think the healthcare would go with AI, and to learn this. And we're very excited for you to have started the first series of the webinars, and maybe at the end of it, we can have you all back and we can see how it grew and the discussions we're having as we build not only just the webinar, but let's build our community together. And hopefully we'll be able to follow every Wednesday and join us on an Emerge Tech Talk. Emerge Healthtech Talks. So thank you very much, everybody. If there's anybody that didn't get questions, please pop it to me on email or on LinkedIn. We'll be sharing the webinar on LinkedIn and our YouTube channels. Please have a look out for that. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely day, and see you next week. Thank you, everybody.